actually defend Taiwan. Let's live in the reality where Joe Biden would not defend Taiwan in case the Chinese invaded. Can we say how ridiculous it is for an 84-year-old woman to visit an island is considered such a massive military escalation, even though, again, all that really happened was an 84-year-old woman visited an island who's an elected representative and is completely in her full right to do so, and then they're going to launch missiles. If the United States did this about a state visit to Cuba, it would be just as ridiculous. Every tanky wants to debate Dylan. Not every tanky. I don't think that's true.
Can you hear me?
Hey, yes, I can hear you. How are you doing today?
Good. Did you lose internet yesterday or something?
Yep, that happens a lot. Well, it's mostly power. Well, it's usually internet and power. So at that point, like, I can, if I lose internet, then maybe I can try to like recover it. But if I lose power, then there's just nothing I can do.
Okay. So I guess to just kind of start, I saw your debate with Ben Burgess, and I was kind of agreeing with what he said. And I guess I can just say something, and I'll see if like, what you think.
Okay.
I think with Taiwan, there's many different angles to look at it. But I think the most important thing is just looking for a sustainable kind of political solution between both sides. The reason I didn't really agree with your position is because you kind of had the analysis that whenever China is going to be increasing the size of its military, the logistics of its military, the solution is just to continually fund Taiwan. And I think that this path is just continually escalating forever. I don't think that's really sustainable in any sense. I think if you look at the polling, the vast majority of Taiwanese people support the status quo. They don't want this to be disrupted by either China or America.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that with stuff like Nancy Pelosi, with kind of Biden's flip-flop on this, like he's made some weird statements of like, we will defend Taiwan, we won't defend Taiwan. Oh, I was joking, that wasn't real, that was whatever. I think with like kind of all this flip-flopping on the issue, with recent things by Nancy Pelosi, I just don't really think this is a sustainable solution. And I think what's most important is to find an agreement that can work for America, China, and Taiwan, for every single party involved. I don't think this. Yeah. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think the thing is with negotiations is you're only going to give as much as you can back up with, right? Like if let's say I'm Luxembourg and I'm negotiating with China, right? I have zero military leverage in that relationship. If there was a real risk of China invading Luxembourg, Luxembourg has no means to defend itself, right? And if it has no means to defend itself, that means China would have a lot less penalty for invading Luxembourg because it can't do anything, right? So the problem is if China continues to get more and more and more powerful militarily, and we're no closer at the moment to any political solution, and we know in the future they're going to continue to get more and more powerful militarily, and they're very open about their intentions about the island of Taiwan. The only solution until there can be a negotiated solution is for the Taiwanese to up their defenses as the Chinese up their offensive measures that they can use against the island. This will also assist Taiwan in negotiations because the less leverage it has militarily, the less leverage it's going to have in negotiations. The vast majority of weapons that are given to any country are never fired, never used, and never actually, put into use against an enemy army. Most of the time, military force is actually ever only used in negotiations. It is actually very rare for a weapon to be used in an invading force against another force. I actually expected the Soviet stockpiles of Ukraine and Russia to never really be used in modern warfare, that it would only be used in, say, like aggressive negotiations. And so for me, it isn't just about defending Taiwan militarily if China was to make the decision that it talks all the time about making. It's also to increase their leverage so they'll have a better negotiating position to defend its democracy, its liberal values, and the stuff that Taiwanese revolutionaries fought and died for, hundreds of thousands of them being purged by Chiang Kai-shek and his government. And so I don't think it's as simple as, well, if we don't send weapons to Taiwan, that's preserving the status quo because the majority of the Taiwanese want to preserve the status quo. The Chinese are trying to upset the status quo by continuously talking about invading, continuously violating Taiwan's airspace, continuously doing military drills closer and closer and closer to Taiwan, and vastly improving its military capacity, including the building of artificial islands that could be used to strike Taiwan. It would be foolish of any world government to not increase their capacity in the face of such threats. And the United States signed the Taiwan's Relations Act in 1979, which set the status quo, which we've had for the last 40-something years, of us supporting them in that effort.
Okay, so there's like a couple things said here. So as you've admitted, we're kind of far away from a political solution. So I have to ask the question of, is Biden, with Biden flip-flopping on if he will defend Taiwan, if he will not defend Taiwan, if Pelosi visiting Taiwan, which angers China, how is any of that helping coming to a political solution? How has this not made the situation much worse in that regard? So I'm not seeing the logic there. And the second thing is,
well, wait. We agree. Sure. Are we negotiating? Are we talking about like defending Taiwan, as in that's a good thing to do, or are we talking about the weapon shipments? Because we
talk about both.
Okay, we can do both.
Sure. But the thing is, Biden, he hasn't had a consistent position on this. There's no consistent position from the American government.
I think it's.
So when he changed his mind after the interview, was that consistent?
It's meant to be that way. The thing is with the American...
So it's meant to be inconsistent?
Yes. It's designed to be. It's supposed to be ambiguous. The whole thing about ambiguity is that it allows us to have a flexible position that allow us to bend and move away from it if the position was untenable, right? But it also means that we possibly are threatening the Chinese with more capacity than we have, which helps the Taiwanese in negotiations. Let me explain. A good example, a good comparison for this would be our position right now on what to do if Russia used nuclear weapons, right? Let's say Russia deployed a strategic nuclear weapon in Ukraine. That would be a horrific thing for them to do. It would set a terrifying precedent on the global stage for the use of nuclear weapons in warfare, which we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War, after which we decided these weapons are too horrific to be used on the modern battlefield. Also, other nations have these now, so it could destroy the whole world. So let's not do that. Now, let's say that they used a nuclear weapon. Joe Biden was asked, what would you do if Russia did that? And he could not give an answer. And it would be stupid for him to give an answer. So he said, I'd listen to my advisor and we'd figure out what to do. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's terrible for Joe to answer this way. It looks weak. But the problem is he's given a realistic answer, because it would depend on how they used the nuclear weapon. Did they use it on like a major population center? Did they use it militarily? Was this, when they say a weapon of mass destruction, were they talking about chemical weapons? Were they talking about nuclear? And so there were so many elements to it that the idea of Joe Biden giving like a straight answer about like, this is what we will do, would damage him, because then the Russians know how far he's willing to go as well. Because the thing is, by him keeping his position ambiguous, the Russians can speculate all day about how far the Americans would be willing to go if he used a nuclear weapon, which might be further in Putin's mind than what the Americans would actually be willing to do. So let's say we wouldn't actually defend Taiwan. Let's live in the reality where Joe Biden would not defend Taiwan in case the Chinese invaded. It's best that the Chinese don't know that, if that's the case, because if they think that we might do it, then we actually have more negotiating power than we actually have physical, like, military ability or a willingness to go this far. And so we could use that leverage despite the fact we wouldn't even defend them. And that's part of the reason why it's ambiguous, is so not only do we have flexibility to move away from it if America decided it wasn't in their best interest, but it also gives us perceived power is actual power, I think, is the simplified version of what I'm saying. And I think that's part of what Biden's strategy is, because this is a consistent effort where every single time he's asked, he'll say, I'll defend Taiwan. And then he'll ask for clarification. He'll say yes. And then the White House will be like, our position hasn't changed. He's done this 3 times now. I cannot believe this is not deliberate, considering he's been asked for clarification on multiple occasions. And he will answer one way while his staff will answer another. I think it's a deliberate effort.
Okay, so there's like a couple things said here. First of all, I don't really like the comparison to Russia, because I think we're at a point where, I'm going to be honest with you, I think we're at a point where Russia is kind of beyond negotiation. I don't really know, like, if you think that like there's going to be a nice debate and then Russia's going to withdraw from Ukraine. I don't really think that's the solution. I think China is well within the realms of negotiation, so I don't really kind of see the analogy there.
Well, no, yeah. my point isn't that these are exact the same. My point is, both situations, the American administration, the Biden administration, is keeping their position ambiguous, exactly what they would do in response, to not only give themselves more flexibility, but to also make it so it's that the other side is like guessing exactly how far they would be willing to go, because there's a good chance then they're going to be speculating about things the Biden administration would never go to the lengths of, but that speculation can keep them from doing it because they're scared of that. That's part of the reason why our position is ambiguous on Taiwan and our position is ambiguous on these weapons. I was just giving another example about strategic ambiguity.
Okay, sure. So you're talking about like a long-term, consistent, like kind of political deal, like the status quo we've had for like the past, I don't know, for 40 or so years. So what does it even look like to have this type of deal? Because obviously, if there's going to be this deal, then America's going to have concessions as well. So I don't know how this would look like exactly, but it could be something like, if you stop violating Taiwanese airspace, we'll decrease the weapon sales.
Well,
if you do this, we'll do that.
Well,
there has to be negotiation on both sides.
I do agree there should be a negotiated deal of some sort, right? But let's negotiate one thing at a time, right? Because I think there should be a negotiated deal on many things, but that doesn't mean I tell one side to stand down while the other side hypes it up. That would be just stupid negotiating. If the Pakistani government, like I believe both India and Pakistan should denuclearize. I believe every country should denuclearize, right? But it'd be very silly of me to go to Pakistan and say denuclearize, and they're like, okay, well, is India going to denuclearize? No, but you should. Like de-escalate. It's like, okay, but India's not de-escalating. Why would we de-escalate? No, but you should. Well, this is why, right? Which is what's being asked of the United States and what's being asked of Taiwan right now, because China is building these bases, these artificial bases. They're violating Taiwanese airspace more and more and more. They're doing more and more military drills. They're military drills specifically designed in order to set up for a situation to invade Taiwan. They even built like an artificial version of the Taiwanese presidential palace for their soldiers to storm. It's pretty, and they make open threats. They make open threats towards the Taiwanese government, right? And so it's very difficult to see that combined with increased military funding and say, well, I think we should keep our policy on Taiwan the same. We should not increase our funding whatsoever as China makes the moves to do so. You match them to keep them at bay. You're trying to deter them. That's the point. We're trying to deter them from invading. We're not giving Taiwan any amount of weapons that they could ever use to invade China. The only reason China should consider any of this military, weapon sales, which is most of this isn't even aid, it's just weapon sales. The only reason they would consider any of this a threat is if they had the explicit intent of invading Taiwan, which they do.
Well, okay, so there's two things there. So with the training exercises, you do understand that like a lot of the major, some of the big training exercises happened directly after Pelosi visited, directly after America escalated the situation. So I don't know if we can say this is entirely just on China.
Can we say how ridiculous it is for an 84-year-old woman to visit an island is considered such a massive military escalation, even though, again, all that really happened was an 84-year-old woman visited an island who's an elected representative and is completely in her full right to do so, and then they're going to launch missiles over the island. They're going to do these massive military drills. They're gonna beat their chest and talk about shooting down her fucking plane. Like, this is insane. If the United States did this about a state visit to Cuba, it would be just as ridiculous.
Well, hold on. I think this is a little bit different than Cuba because nobody considers Cuba to be a part of America. No country in the world considers that. Where, with the case of Taiwan, like some.
Well, wait. How about we said instead, if you visit Venezuela, we're going to shoot down your plane because Maduro is a fake government. We don't consider Maduro the rightful leader of Venezuela. We consider it to be Juan Guaido. So what if we said?
Majority of countries recognize Venezuela.
Who cares? Who cares? We're talking about the United States position, right? The majority of countries still has some relationship with Taiwan, even if they don't say you're a country. The reason they don't say it is because China's bullied them into not doing it, right? They've bullied them into thinking like, hey, if you're gonna have a relationship with Taiwan, you're not gonna have a relationship with us. Even though like Taiwan has all the markings of a country. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it is a country.
Well, okay. So let's back up a little bit. So the reason why Pelosi would obviously, like her visit to Taiwan, would obviously be kind of seen as aggressive to China, is because they don't want the American government to give a hard stance on like Taiwanese independence or anything like that. So obviously they're going to be upset about that. I'm not saying they have to do the response that they did, but I'm saying that you can't just do these things and expect like no reaction. It's like,
oh no, we can expect a reaction, but that doesn't make the actions of Nancy Pelosi immoral or wrong. For example, I would expect a reaction from, say, Russia for us to send $1 billion or $2 billion in aid to Ukraine. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We should still do it because it's the right thing to do.
I think this is a little bit different. Like, because I mean, even Joe Biden himself initially said that this was probably not the best idea. Obviously, he changed his opinion later.
Yeah,
But
because, and I disagree with Joe Biden. I think he's being somewhat weak on the issue.
So yeah, well, this is the inconsistency I'm talking about because he changed his mind on that later too.
Well, I don't know if it's inconsistent or Nancy Pelosi forced his hand, because the problem is he was put in a position where he either tells a public representative of the United States House that no, you shouldn't go to this island of your own free will, when in privately he was probably like, I don't think this is a great idea, now that China's challenged his government. Because then that would mean the American government was setting the precedent that we don't want elected representatives to go of their own free will to another democratic country, even though this is things that the House, does for other countries. They do it for Armenia, they do it for Israel, do it for all these other countries I have a relationship with, but we can't do it for Taiwan because Beijing doesn't like it.
Because we recognize Armenia to be an independent country. That's not the case with Taiwan.
But it is an independent country. I mean, let's be for real, right?
Let's read the Taiwan's Relations Act. Let me read this right now.
Well, wait, no. I didn't say what the official document says. I'm asking you, in reality, right? We both acknowledge like Taiwan is an independent country, right?
Yeah, but that's not. Yeah, according to our personal opinions, but I don't really know.
Well, it's not about our personal opinion. It's about just like. Okay, if I pick up, okay, let's play a game, right? Okay, so what I'm holding in my hand right now, okay, is a microphone. Would you agree with this?
If it was a microphone, sure.
Okay, well, it is a microphone, right? I mean, it's being used to
I'm not looking at your screen. Yeah.
Okay, just believe that I'm holding a microphone. Now, if 99 people came in this room and said that's not a microphone, that's a fallopian tube. Would that make it a fallopian tube? If just everybody's coming in here and saying it's a fallopian tube now? It's It's objectively a mic. Like, we can see it. We know it's a mic. It has all the features of a mic. It does what a mic does. And so when we look at Taiwan and we know that it has, its own currency, it has its own government, democratically elected, it has its own flag, it has its own anthem, it has its own history, it has, its own rules and laws and regulations. It has its own like trading flag that it trades under. It has its own governmental ministers. I mean, like, it has every single sign of a country, right?
Sure. I agree with you,
but if we call it not a country, we're just doing it in a coping and seething moment to please China. That's the purpose. And so when we say it's our personal opinion to the country, it's like, I mean, come on, what is a country then? Is it a country just what we all internationally recognize? Like, if like every like eventually, like if you build up enough scoreboard points, so you're now a country officially? Because if that was the case, then was China not a country until 1973?
Well, no. So what I'm saying is that obviously we can have our opinion that Taiwan is a country, but that doesn't change American policy, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about like Joe Biden probably thinks in his mind that Taiwan's an independent country, but that's not the policy of the United States.
Yeah, that's not the policy of the United States, but that doesn't mean that somebody, an American public representative, couldn't go there and visit it and talk to it about how it should talk to its representative or its president about the importance of our relationship.
So hold on. So you're saying hold on. I'm trying to understand your position here. So we should. So you're saying that. So should America recognize Taiwan as an independent country?
Right now, I think it would probably be too risky, but we could probably build up to it maybe. But like right now, no. But that's not what Nancy Pelosi did.
Well, she's the third highest position in the United States
but did she go there and say, wow, what a great country, I love this independent country? No, she came here and was like, I love this democracy. Tsai Ing-wen is a very lovely woman. Our relationship with your lovely people is very important. That's what she did. She didn't go there and declare, I now officially recognize Taiwan to be an independent country. She didn't do that.
Yeah, she was obviously talking about Taiwan. Obviously, she was obviously talking about Taiwan.
Yeah, she was.
I don't know.
Wait, where did she declare that Taiwan's an independent country?
Do you think that do you think that when she was talking about the shining democracy, she was talking about Xi Jinping?
No, no. It is a democracy, but where did she declare it to be an independent country?
Well, she didn't say that words exactly, but she
Yeah,
obviously
because
said
she
that, you
didn't.
know.
She didn't change her policy or the American government's policy. Not to mention, she's not a representative of Joe Biden's government necessarily. She's also an independent elected congressperson. If Matt Gaetz went there, even though if every American representative except Matt Gaetz died, he would be president, that doesn't mean he's the representative of America policy. If he went there and said Taiwan, that's why I have no problem with like a congressman, even if a congressman was to say Taiwan's an independent country, because I number one, be happy with it because he's normalizing what is, to be truth. And number two, he's not the president. There's a difference between what like Joe Biden does and what, I don't know, fucking Steny Hoyer or AOC does.
Well, Nancy Pelosi is like the third most important person in America, so she's not just like some random
but as we talked about earlier, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi didn't even necessarily agree on this. So that shows that she's not necessarily a direct representation of Joe Biden's government.
Which is my point, that America doesn't have a consistent policy on this.
What do you mean America, right? The thing is,
the American government.
The problem is, we are not a dictatorship in the United States, right? So many people who are elected are going to have different positions. And if you're a representative of the United States, you don't just do what the president wants you to. This is something that I think has built up since the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. The idea that the president is the supreme executive, so he controls all foreign policy. Everybody else should shut the fuck up, right? If you have a different position than the president of the United States, you are most certainly allowed to share it. In fact, it's part of the reason why I was so supportive of it. If you watch my debate with Ben Burgess, you would know that part of my reason is I hate this idea of the domineering chief executive that holds all control of our foreign policy. I want our congressional representatives to be more involved in our foreign policy, which Nancy Pelosi was here and in Armenia.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people can have their opinions if it's consistent with international law, but obviously you can understand that even if a congressperson does these types of actions, it can still be very detrimental to a U.S. negotiation policy in the region. Imagine if a congressperson, any random congressperson said, "I don't recognize Israel. I recognize Hamas as the only legitimate government of Palestine." Wouldn't that kind of be a bad thing to say, even if it's just one congressperson? Wouldn't that be kind of a startling thing to say?
I would say that it would depend on whether it was a good or bad position or what it did to America's position. I don't think Nancy Pelosi doing what she did moved us off of our red line with China, which would be my main concern, about the idea of the American government officially recognizing Taiwan as an independent country, right? Or something along those lines. So I'm not that fearful. To be quite honest, nothing really happened after Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan. Most of it, like I said before, it happened would probably be chest beating and military drills. No,
there were sanctions. There were sanctions on Taiwan.
Okay, and what did they do?
I think they sanctioned some materials like sand or something. I can pull up the specific. They also
they sanctioned Nancy Pelosi's family. So I'm going to be quite frank. I doubt she gives a fuck. And they sanctioned sand. Taiwan has beaches, so I think they're fine.
Well, probably more than that. I can look up the exact sanction right now, but the point I'm trying to make is
Tsai Ing-wen seemed to be quite happy about the visit. I mean, she welcomed Nancy Pelosi, so I don't think this is an issue of the Taiwanese being unhappy here.
And Hamas would also welcome American recognition, but
do you think that Hamas and Tsai Ing-wen or have the same moral? We're
no,
talking.
But I'm saying that no. But I'm saying that just because the other party's happy about it doesn't change policy.
Okay, so if an American representative went to an independence struggle that was good and gave it a thumbs up, let's say an American representative went to a Palestinian pro-Palestinian hey, they deserve to have an independent country organization, right? Not necessarily Hamas, right? But any organization like that, I wouldn't be against it, even if it undermined the Biden administration's official policy, because that's the policy I favor. Is that Palestine should be allowed to have its own country.
Okay. I'm starting to see your position a little bit better here.
Yes, we're a democracy, and Democratic representatives are allowed to have their own opinions and speak about it in office, even if it undermines the federal one, because that's how democracies work.
Sure. So you value, a morally right position rather than, a consistent position? That's what I'm trying to get at here.
Well, because that's not what I'm saying. So in society, let's say that Nancy Pelosi came out tomorrow and said, "I'm in favor of marijuana legalization." Should she not do that? Should she come out tomorrow and should she? No, I'm asking you. Should she come out tomorrow and say, "I'm in favor of marijuana legalization"? That's a very simple question. Yes or no?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she
sure.
should. But that's not the position of the Biden administration. Why is America being so hypocritical? I think this is ridiculous because she's a representative in
Well,
Congress. She has her own position separate from Biden's position. It's also the correct position. It's not hypocritical of her to hold a different position than a different person in our government. That's a democracy. We're not fucking Xi Jinping's China. We're not fucking
well, no,
Kim Jong-un's North Korea. We have representatives who have different positions because they were elected to represent their different districts who all have different opinions.
no. I see what you're saying here, but the point I'm trying to make it. I'm kind of losing my train. The point that I'm trying to make here is that obviously, random elected officials, they can do whatever they want, but I think we should still have like respect for the treaties and kind of deals that we have. And as you said at the beginning,
Okay, so what treaty did Nancy Pelosi violate?
Well, no, obviously not in this one, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, sure. But the point I'm trying to make is, you said this at the start too, that you do favor like a long-term political solution, and I'm not sure how this gets us closer to that solution.
Well, the thing is, I want to pursue a long-term political solution while not trying to pursue it and then destroying what I'm trying to, because what I want to pursue is a democratic and free Taiwan, right? Because that's what the Taiwanese want from all the polling can indicate. That's what I want. Now,
yeah, Taiwan has that with the status quo.
With the status quo, but the thing is, like, let's say that you have one nation that another nation is threatening to invade, and nation B has a military strength of 10 and nation A has a military strength of 10. Probably not going to get invaded, because if they do, they're probably going to fail, right? But if nation A keeps building up and it's like, they get to 50, 40, or 40, 50, 60, 70, while they're staying at the level of 10, like eventually that's going to be like, oh fuck, actually this might be plausible. Their invasion might be plausible. So you can say, oh, it's escalating for them to arm up. I mean, if we look at the military funding between China and Taiwan, China has been the one escalating its military funding, escalating its military power, escalating its naval power, everything in comparison to Taiwan. I mean, Taiwan even like stopped with its, I think it stopped with its draft system. They like stopped drafting people. I mean, they, in some ways, they even went in the other direction. So it's hard for me to look at this, right? Look at oh, we're going to send some weapons to Taiwan because obviously China's getting more powerful in Taiwan, as the Taiwan's Relations Act stated. We need to give them the capacity to defend themselves against an invasion. Like, I hate looking at that and saying, oh, Taiwan's escalating or America's escalating. I mean, it's kind of like, it's like watching Russia invade Ukraine, then America sends Ukraine weapons and like, wow, look at America escalating. Like, really? Is that what you're taking away from this?
To be honest, I just don't think nobody recognizes Ukraine to be a part of Russia. But so the point I'm trying to make, so yeah, what you're saying is that like,
wait, why would that matter? China, who gives a fuck? Why does it matter? Why does it matter if China's been able to bully the international community into pretending Taiwan doesn't exist?
Because we're talking about a settlement, a policy. We're not talking about opinions. We're talking about policy right here.
Yeah, but the thing is, everybody can have every opinion in the world, but if the United States Marine Corps is on the shores of Taiwan, there's not really much anybody can do about it.
Well, I don't think that would be the best solution. But
yeah, so but I'm saying, like, people can have opinions, right? But like, Taiwan is a country, and so whether people recognize it or not doesn't really matter to me. Most people didn't recognize Mao Zedong's China as a country in the 50s and 60s. Most people recognize Taiwan. That doesn't mean that one day at the UN, when 173 nations recognized China and 172 recognized Taiwan, that China became a country and Taiwan didn't. Like that. Like, I don't think it's just, the most people.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, there's policy and there's opinion. What you said earlier, that's something I was going to get back to. You said that like America hasn't done anything. You said that it's mainly China that's the one that's escalating. And this is why I think more than ever, that's why a long-term solution is the most important, because we can't play this game forever. Because let me ask you this then. Like, are we supposed to just like continually fund Taiwan forever? Like, we gave them like 18 billion. I don't know the exact. I think it was like 18 billion this year. Are we supposed to give them 20 billion next year? 50 billion next year? Are we supposed to do this forever?
Okay,
forever?
So we're talking about weapons sales. So why would weapons sales at all be a funding concern to the United States? We're selling them weapons. They pay for it.
Well, because obviously
people will report. The thing is, people will report on, and the thing is, I've seen Hassan do this. I've seen a lot of people do this. Well, they'll say, "Wow, we're giving them all these weapons." It's everything I see, usually in like 90% of cases, is they buy a weapon. We're selling them a weapon. So why would that be a concern to our piggy bank if we're selling them a weapon? If anything, that should be something that makes you happy, because that means more Americans are employed. I mean, we're not losing money there. If they're buying the weapons, we're making money.
Well, I don't think that, like, I don't know, the war machine for the sake of jobs. That's not really.
Well, I'm not saying no. That's not what I said. Don't misrepresent me.
I get what you're saying, but you're saying like I think
No,
jobs
because
is
no,
like
you were like
something
you're
like
like should we just fund them forever? What do you mean fund them?
Well,
They're
no.
funding us.
No, that's well, like let's say supply them forever, because you were talking about this with Ben Burgess. So,
Yeah,
like,
I'm
asking.
absolutely fine with that. The thing is, why would I ever care? Why would I be angry about somebody buying American products, even if they're weapons? If the weapons are being used to defend a democracy, like I believe in defending democracies very fiercely, very vigorously, very, very strongly. I believe in that. That's why I don't want to fucking do anything to help Saudi Arabia, but I'm willing to do something to support Taiwan. Because we have similar values that I believe in, values that I think that the Taiwanese people want to defend. And if we can make a buck doing it, what's the problem? Like, you say, oh, that's cold-hearted, but like, what's the problem?
So the best way to preserve what Taiwan has is to have a long-term agreement that makes both sides happy.
Yes, but the thing is, without leverage, China's never going to respect Taiwan. If Taiwan is weak and China is strong, China will brush aside the demands. A great example is there was a long-term agreement between Hong Kong, the United Kingdom, and China on the idea of preserving this thing called one country, two systems. So it's also, this is important because it's the same thing China offered Taiwan, the one country, two systems model. What happened to that? What happened to all the people arrested? What happened to, you know what happened to it? It got trashed. It got ripped in half. Carrie Lam ripped it in half with the assistance of the central government in Beijing. And before you know it, booing the national anthem can get you 3 years in prison now in Hong Kong.
So about the leverage, this is what I said to you in DMs. The weapon sales, the decrease of weapon sales, things around that's something to be negotiated about. So it is leverage, and it can be negotiated down.
Yeah. So why? Okay. So we negotiate them decreasing the militarization of the Taiwan Strait in response to maybe us limiting our weapon sales, right?
Yeah. So like
that's something like I don't disagree with that, but the problem is they're not doing that. So what do? If they're not doing it right now, what do we do?
Well, so first of all,
then we still sell them weapons.
Well, first of all, we've had a peaceful status quo for like the past 40 years, and I think the status quo can be preserved. You're saying that China's not agreeing to its end of the deal, and
no,
I think
because China doesn't want to preserve the status quo; they want to disrupt the status quo.
Then
their long-term goal, and the thing is, I tend to believe people when they tell me these things, is to annex Taiwan because they believe Taiwan is a part of China, right? And they, as a matter of national policy, will not accept any outcome that is not Taiwan becoming a part of China. If they have their way, if they have the ability to make Taiwan a part of China, they will. Therefore, we should give Taiwan all the means it can and possible for it to make sure that China cannot do that by force. If Taiwan one day is like, you know what, maybe we actually want to be part of China, that's its own deal, that's its own business, that's their own people choosing their own destiny, but that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems they want to do their own thing, it seems they want to have their own democracy, and so it's very difficult for me to look at this and say, it seems like the Chinese really want to negotiate an independent Taiwan. It doesn't sound like that, does it? Does it really sound like there's any reality where China's going to accept an independent Taiwan without Taiwan being able to say, we will fucking blow your head off if you try to land on our shores?
Well, they have accepted an independent Taiwan for the last 40 years.
Have they? So where they haven't accepted it. The reason they've accepted.
When has China bombed Taiwan or invaded Taiwan?
Multiple times during the Taiwan Strait crises.
Well, no, yeah, obviously back then. But I'm saying like since we've reached an agreement.
They have still, yes. That's what every Taiwan Strait crisis was about, was them like shelling the islands near China and like.
Wait, so China shelled like Taiwanese cities?
Yes.
Let me Google this. When?
Yes.
Hold on, what year is this?
Just look up Taiwan Strait crisis. This happened like multiple times.
Was this before the Taiwan Relations Act?
I think most of them were before the Taiwan's Relations Act.
Yeah, so before we reach an
But the
agreement,
Taiwan's
that's what I
relate,
said.
but that's not even an agreement with China. What do you mean reaching an agreement? That's an agreement with Taiwan. The Taiwan's Relations Act does not dictate American policy towards China. It dictates American policy towards Taiwan, and that was not
And that's what
negotiated.
dictates the
And
status
that
quo.
wait, but that was not negotiated with the Chinese. That was actually something that pissed off the Chinese a lot, and they didn't want it. That was done by Congress, not as a matter of federal policy. That was done against the wishes of Jimmy Carter.
No, okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that since we've established the status quo, we haven't had this conflict. So, okay, sure. I can see your point on
Possibly.
that. I can see your point
I'll
on that.
try. I mean, I can't remember if there was any after the 70s, so I'll say sure.
Okay, sure. So, well, I guess that's kind of all I had to say. I can see your points. I don't know if I entirely agree with it yet, but I guess I can see.
I
the
mean,
argument.
it's like I do believe in a peaceful settlement to this because I don't want to see a shooting war in Taiwan, obviously. But we also need to acknowledge that if we're not in a position right now where the Chinese are willing to back an inch, or they're not willing to back off of the idea of invading Taiwan, which Xi Jinping's government is not willing to do that at the moment. Maybe a future government will. Then until there can be a peaceful solution reached, we need to defend Taiwan's democracy, and we should defend it ferociously.
Okay, I guess I'll have like one final question on that then. So if you're talking about like the hardliners in China, and something that I think Ben Burgess brought this up. Don't you think that this type of activity is like what exactly empowers the hardliners? Because I know he brought this point up.
This
like,
is I always I know this is something I used to agree with more, and now I agree with less, because do I really think that if we started selling less weapons to Taiwan, that Xi Jinping, somebody who centralized power as much as he would, might change his position on Taiwan, or that his opponents might gain power? Considering how much he's arrested his political opponents, suppressed his political opponents, suppressed the press that disagreed with him, and we've seen such a consistent position on Xi Jinping's China. I think what is more likely to happen if we just were to stop selling weapons to Taiwan is they would just, take advantage of the situation, as I would do in their situation. If I was in their position, I would do the same thing, and tighten the noose around the island. Further isolate Taiwan, making their position weaker and easier for us to negotiate concessions out of the Taiwanese. That's what I would do if I was in his position. That's what I would assume he would do in his position, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. I mean, like, I think there's certain if something is fundamental to a government, it's kind of hard by you just taking a weaker stance will they change their mind. I think there's certain things that you have to force them to accept a different outcome in, because there's just they can't deal with the other outcome. Like, I don't think China wants the world to blow up, right? So I don't think they're gonna be very happy about invading Taiwan right now if there's a decent chance of America getting involved. And so I think there's some things that, like, you can't just get by being a nice guy, right? And I think this is one of those things.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I can see that.
Let me ask you, do you think if we took like a softer position on Japanese, like, for example, this is talked about by some people, do you think if we took a softer position on oil to Japan during the Second World War, that they wouldn't have eventually invaded the Philippines, or they wouldn't have continued to invade and island hop across the Pacific? I think they would have. I think their ideological tendencies trended towards them trying to dominate the Pacific as the kind of like the master race of Asia, right? The Japanese, the Japanese co-prosperity sphere was destined to liberate the territories of Asia from the imperialism of the West as they just replace it with their own. So I think that Japan's ideology would have put them in that path no matter what.
Sure, but I think that's kind of a loaded example. Like, if China was mass murdering millions of Taiwanese people and genociding them, I'd obviously be agreeing with you. I just think this is kind of like a loaded example.
No, I'm not saying they're the same. Obviously, Imperial Japan is like a special type of evil, right? Even though I think China is also has a lot of terrible things about it. But what I'm saying is that
Chiang Kai-shek, when he established martial law and was murdering thousands of Taiwanese people, that was bad too. But America supported that, so.
Yeah, we did support that, but I also support now, considering all those people died for democracy in Taiwan, I want to preserve that democracy in Taiwan, because when those protesters won and Chiang Kai-shek's government gave up power, well, his son's government gave up power, after all the white purges, they didn't say, okay, annex us now. It was, okay, let's establish a democracy, because that's what they wanted. And that's why I am especially passionate about this, because I think about how many people died to get us to this point, to get us to a point where there's democracy in Taiwan. The same thing is true about South Korea as well. The amount of people who died under the dictatorship we supported there to eventually get the democracy they have today. Are these societies perfect? No. Are they flawed? Yes. But these are societies built by the people there after overthrowing the dictatorships that were suppressing them. And I think that, that's a mighty proud thing. I mean, they're very proud of that, and I think we should protect that.
Okay, sure. I'll think about this. I think there's some points here. I might have to go like a couple minutes. Can I ask you something about Russia, Ukraine before I leave?
Sure. Yeah, you can ask me something about Russia, Ukraine.
So multiple. I know you said something about this with the mobilization. That you think it would be like an okay thing to like accept Russian refugees who don't want to fight in the army.
Yeah, I actually tweeted something about this today. I know there's a lot of people who are like very not supportive of this because they're like, revolution at home, we don't want to take you in. Like, but my position is help as many draft dodgers as possible. Help them over the border, give them some pot, let them chill out, let them eat some munchies. That's one less person in the trenches shooting the Ukrainians, right?
Sure. I agree with that position, but the reason I'm asking this is because Zelensky said that like Russians should be banned from using like European airlines. I'm pretty sure Estonia, Lithuania, Germany, they've all banned Russian people from coming. So that's what the policy that I'm seeing.
I don't know if they've banned all Russians from coming, but they've banned like the majority. Yes. I think there's like certain like political asylum things that you can still get if you let's say you said Putin's stupid. Yeah, I think you can still probably flee. But if you're like a draft dodger or something, like no. You can't, and I disagree with that position. I understand why they have it. There's a few reasons why they have it. They want to keep as many of the people who disagree with the draft there and disagree with Putin's government's there, so there can be more disorder at home. But I disagree with the methods. I usually believe in the free travels of people, especially those who want to flee authoritarian regimes, and I have no reason to change my position here as well. If anything, I would want these people to be open with open arms. So it would be a shining example of our system of government, our system of democracy and humanitarianism compared to what the Russians are doing.
Sure. Okay. There's like one final thing I can ask. Do you are we at a point? This is something that was kind of talked about at the end of the USSR. It's like, wait, now we can be friends with Russia and everything will be happy. Do you think we're at a point where Russia is beyond, like, I'm not talking about right now, but like, do you think we're at a point where Russia can never kind of be integrated with the rest of the world? Is Russia just isolated forever? Is this like kind of what's going to be the end of it?
Unironically, the Russians seem to be headed on that path. Like, it's weird because they're getting to a state where it almost feels like they're going North Korea style, right? Where even the Chinese are distancing themselves from the Russians in certain instances, especially in concerning the war. When there was a lot of talk early on, is China going to support them? But China just has completely distanced themselves from them on this. They haven't come out and openly supported it. I mean, they haven't exactly opposed it either, but I think a lot of people expected something different here.
Well, they still buy Russian gas and oil.
Yeah, but they're
like kind of gone past sanctions.
But the thing is, well, actually, Chinese companies have reacted to the sanctions. We have seen a lot of Chinese companies actually stop working with Russia because the American market is just so much more important to them. I mean, the American market is so much larger than the Russian market. California has a bigger GDP than Russia. And these Chinese companies understand that the American markets are much more important than any Russian market. And so we've actually but let me explain. But let me say something.
Sure.
When you talk about the oil, they're buying it at $35 cheaper than the normal price for the oil that they're buying. So they're buying the oil at a massive discount from the Russians. They're taking advantage of the, quite frankly, pathetic economic position that the Russian economy currently is in to buy cheaper oil, which, it's not surprising that China would want cheaper oil. But I mean, like, that's better for Russia. But the problem is, number one, they're selling it for much cheaper. And number two, they just don't have the pipelines in Asia in order to make up for the massive drop in oil sales that they're making to Europe as they try to hold off on the pipelines, especially going into winter, where they're going to try to use the most where they're going to try to stranglehold Europe the most to get as much leverage as possible to try to like freeze them out, which I don't think is going to work. I think after the Kharkiv offensive, I think the Western governments are pretty, like, there was this question in the air of whether Ukraine could win. I think that question for most Western governments is now answered, and we're going to we're gonna probably see them hold steadfast through the winter.
I mean, yeah, depending on how the mobilization goes, but at this point, I don't even know if that's gonna
Dude,
help.
I'm gonna talk about the mobilization today, but I don't think the Russians are gonna be able to pull it off. It's like this is seems to be this organized. There's a lot of reports of like 62-year-old men with fucking arthritis getting called up. We're seeing a lot of people.
Oh wait, hold on. Did you see a clip? I think it was like Wagner Battalion or like Wagner Group. They're going to a prison. They're like, we're gonna hire you to fight for us. Yeah, I don't know.
They went there. They were like, please, all of you arrested in prison for sexual offenses, do not rape, please. It was, oh God. And we're talking about the worst, the private military company with the worst military reputation in the world. When we talk about from like a humanitarian perspective, combining them with rapists and murderers. And I'm not saying all the prisoners are that, but when you have to tell somebody not to rape and murder before you give them a gun and send them to a foreign country where you're pushing them full of propaganda, dehumanizing the people you're invading, like it's not a recipe for success, especially when the Wagner Group are a bunch of criminals themselves led by someone with neo-Nazi tattoos. Like this is not a recipe for success.
Sure. Okay, I have to go in 1 second. I guess the one thing I can point out is Russia has just decided to hold its like glorious democratic referendum in Kherson, and I think Donbass as well.
I saw. Did you see the polling they released? They said 97% of the population in Kherson supports becoming part of Russia.
It looks like an Assad fucking voting box, like 89% of the vote. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy because Kherson, like all the occupation, like I was reading this, like these messages from the Rusich. This is like a Russian neo-Nazi division, that was helping occupy Kherson, and he's like, all these subhumans like oppose us. They spit at us. That we can see their glares. It's impossible. We no matter how much money we give them, they hate Russia. We must ban Ukraine. Like everybody knows that Kherson has seen some of the most active resistance to Russian occupation, and it's some of the most anti-Russian like oblasts currently under occupation. But then just saying, yep, 97%. That would be like me saying, yep, Mississippi went 99% for Joe Biden in this election. It's like, okay, sure, buddy.
Okay. I think maybe Crimea is a little bit different. I think there are probably some people in Crimea that genuinely do want to be part of Russia. I don't know about if that's.
I mean, there are people there. I've talked to soldiers who say, yeah, there's people in this area who want to be part of Russia. I mean, they're like 1 out of every like 15 people, right? Like it's very like a small minority, especially after the invasion. But like a radical, loud minority should not dictate how everybody else like lives their life, you know?
Sure. So let me ask you a difficult question then. Let's say we had a magic wand and we could 100% like see what's in these people's mind. If it was like actually proven that most people in Crimea wanted to be part of Russia, would you accept that? Would that be acceptable, even if people in Crimea did want that?
I guess do you know why that's a difficult question? Because this is a question that has to do with settler colonialism, where if, let's say, you forced a bunch of people out of their homes and then you hold a referendum with the people who just stole their homes, like, is that a fair referendum? Should the people who were just expelled from their homes get a vote? Should the people who were forced to go back to Ukraine get a vote? What about all the Tartars who over the last 60 to 70 years have been forcefully expelled from their homes, in many instances killed? The activists shot and dumped in rivers over the last 8 years. All the people who fled Crimea over the last 8 years to go to Ukraine. So if we could get everybody who's been affected to get a vote and like look into their minds, then I would say yes. Because I would want to include those who were displaced by the Russian invasion. And by many of the activities that Russia is engaged in, even the Soviet Union. If you wanted me to make my magic wand, then I would include also those expelled during the Soviet eras. But if we could meet those conditions, then obviously, and yes, yeah.
Okay. Well, I gotta go. I'll see what you say in your stream. But yeah, my phone's about to fucking die.
Okay. See ya. Bye bye. Well, look at that. We had a debate. Everybody. Look at that. We had a debate on the internet. Isn't that great? Isn't that, look, can we do that in Beijing? Nah, not sure fucking couldn't.